Okay, so we're going to start on part 6 of passing your Checkride here in Robinson R44. And the next subject that we're going to cover, in quite detailed coverage on it, is going to be on weather. Right? So before we get going, I'll just share with you guys that I started flying back in the middle 70s, and some 40-odd years ago, there's been a lot of changes in aviation since that time. But the two biggest changes in aviation have got to do with weather reporting. Back in the middle 70s, weather reporting was horrible, or weather forecasting was horrible. It was basically about anybody's best guess. You know, your best weather forecast was to go over to the window and look about as far as you can see, and that was about it. I mean, it was absolutely horrible on forecasting on the weather back in the 70s. But it's gotten much better, and we get exceedingly accurate forecasts. You know, have almost real-time radar available right on your phone. I mean, weather, both the reporting and the forecasting has gotten much better. The second thing that's improved significantly in aviation has been navigation. Your phone is a GPS, all right? I mean, that thing would have been a piece of a miracle back in the 70s. Back in the 70s, we had VORs, a magnetic compass, you had a map, and fairly crappy wind forecast, and that's what you had to work with. Now you've got multiple GPSs on the aircraft. You know, it would be difficult to get lost anymore with navigation. So the navigation has really improved. The aircraft design themselves really hasn't. We're still flying 1920s and 30 design engines. We've got you know, with magnetos that were invented in the 1890s. We're going to be getting to electronic ignition here in the not too distant future, so hopefully that's going to change things up a bit. Okay, so let's get started on weather. One of the first things that you need to sear into your brain is that there's a nice website that you can go to, and the web address is AVIATIONWEATHER.GOV. So AVIATIONWEATHER.GOV, right? So if you type that into your computer, and here we are, AVIATIONWEATHER.GOV, it's going to bring you to this website right here, the NOAA's Aviation Weather Center. And as we start talking more specifically about weather, we're going to reference different parts of this website here. So remember, AVIATIONWEATHER.gov. Okay, and you can also pull up AVIATIONWEATHER.gov on your phone. Just type in AVIATIONWEATHER.gov, and you go to that site right there. It's the same site as I had pulled up here, and it's very useful. Now, are there other apps and websites you can go to? Sure, there's literally hundreds, if not thousands of them, different apps. And while we're on the subject, before we go any farther, if you're going to be flying much, you probably ought to get a subscription to ForeFlight. Now, I'm not a ForeFlight owner. I don't own stock in the company, whatever. But ForeFlight is a very good application that has pretty much everything you need to fly with. I mean, I can go all around the world with ForeFlight on my phone. All right. There's another application called Garmin Pilot that a lot of people seem to be real pleased with. It does kind of the same thing. But ForeFlight, there's 3 different tiers. I think it's $100, $200, and $300. Really, all you're probably ever going to need is the $100 tier. So it's $100 a year. It gives you all the information that you need, including the weather, and it's very quickly you can get to the weather. It's a real-time, essentially real-time radar that gets overlaid on the map that you're flying on, and it's a very useful app to have. The reason that I picked the NOAA Aviation Weather website, AVIATIONWEATHER.gov, is because that's what you're paying for with your taxes. All right? And it's the website that has a huge amount of information on there. Just about everything you could possibly need for weather you're going to be able to get off of AVIATIONWEATHER.gov. And are there other websites that are just as useful? Maybe. I don't know. The one that I use is the one that's government sponsored, AVIATIONWEATHER.gov, and that'll get you pretty much everything you need. Okay, so let's get started. If you look at the PTS, when it comes to weather information, all right, first thing that they want you to be well versed in is your ability to read a METAR, a TAF, and list area forecasts on here. By the way, area forecasts in text don't exist anymore. They have what they call a graphical area forecast, and I'll show you what that looks like here in just a bit. But the first thing, the first two, a METAR and a TAF. A METAR is an observation. Basically tells you what the weather is like in the actually the airport, the 5-mile area around the airport. And a TAF is a forecast, and it tells you what the forecasted weather is going to be, usually for 24 hours. It can be somewhat less than that, maybe only valid for like 18 hours if the weather is changing significantly. And if the weather is expected to be very good and very not much variance to the weather, it may be valid for up to 30 hours. So let's take a look at those two. Okay, so if you go on the internet and you do a quick search for METAR and TAF abbreviations, you can find several lists of them. And what you would likely need to do is just print out, so there's a list of METAR and TAF abbreviations. Just print those out and use those as a reference off to the side while you practice reading METARs and TAFs. And one of the easiest ways to practice reading a METAR and a TAF is to once again go to the NOAA's website, which is AVIATIONWEATHER.GOV. Let's type that in, AVIATIONWEATHER.GOV. And if you go up to the top here, across the top, you'll see there's several headings here, and you'll see METARs is right here. So if you just click on the METAR tab, and then down here at the bottom, we'll scroll up a bit. Over here to the right, you put in the 4-letter identifier of the airport. Let's put in Memphis, would be KMEM. And if you click right here where it says decoded, it will give it to you both in raw and decoded form, right? So then let's click on that. Okay, and here it is. So here's our TAF for Memphis, and so it gives it to you in raw form across here, right? And what you can do is practice trying to read this METAR. So it has where it's for, KMEM, METAR for Memphis, KMEM. When it was issued on the 20th at 22:32 Zulu. We're 5 hours behind Zulu, so that'd be 17:32 or 5:32 local time. The winds at the time it was issued were 280 at 7, 10 statute miles visibility. Scattered 4,200. You always add 2 zeros to the number here. So scattered at 4,200, broken at 4,200, broken at 25,000. Temperature 30, dew point 4. Altimeter 2989, and the remark section is A02, means it's an automated observation with weather discrimination, and then T with this 0300 is actually your temperature down to a decimal point. So the temperature was 30 degrees and the dew point was 24.4 degrees. And then you just come down here and read and see how accurate you were. Okay, 30 degrees, 24.4, 2989. Winds were from the west at 280 at 7 knots, which is right at 8 miles an hour here. Listen, 7 knots here. So what you want to do is just practice a bunch. So you go to the website there and put in different TAFs for different different METARs from different locations, and practice reading them. Because when you go to take your check ride, a lot of times what the examiner will do is he or she may print out some TAFs for you to read and some METARs for you to read, or they may say, okay, show me how you pull up the METAR for Miami. Just go ahead and take your phone there and pull up the METAR for Miami, and you take your phone and go to the NA website, KMIA is Miami, and pull it up and then read the TAF to them. Or like I say, they may have pre-printed TAFs and METARs rather that they want you to read out. So there's no way to spoon feed this to you, you just got to practice. So you just pull it up on there, read it, and then compare it, the decoded form, and see how accurate that you were. And you can do exactly the same thing with TAFs, okay? So if we go back to the page that we looked at before, I'll go back one page. And down here where it has METAR data is here, you can go back up to the top. Go back one. And we can go to TAFs. Oop, there's TAFs right there. So we click on TAFs, scroll down just a bit, and right over here again we can put in the 4-letter identifier to the airport. And for once again we'll put in Memphis, I guess, KMEN, and hit search. And again, if we put it in decoded form right here, It's going to give you the TAF, so it'll give you each line of the TAF for you to read, and then the decoded form under here to see how accurate that you actually were with interpreting the TAF. And that's about the easiest way to do it. And unfortunately, like I say, you got to spend some time doing this. And why do they want you to be able to read the TAF in the raw form, not the decoded form? Good question, but it's but they do. So you're going to have to learn the raw form, and the easiest way to do that is just to read and practice and put in the decoded form and see how well that you did interpreting both the Metars and the TAFs. Okay, so looking at that TAF reminded me of a specific question, and this is a specific question that you're very, very, very likely to get asked, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about here. So, can I increase the size? This makes it a little easier to see. But so here's your Memphis TAF again. So right up here we got Memphis, time it was issued, all that. If you come over here, the forecast is for few. And again, you add 2 zeros to that, so few clouds at 2,000, scattered at 2,500. So the question is going to be, okay, well at this time in Memphis, what would be the ceiling in this situation here? What's your ceiling there? All right, so the answer is there is no ceiling there. You have few clouds at 2,000, scattered at 2,500. All right, let's go down to the bottom here. All right, at this time, when it was issued, you had scattered 5,000, broken 15,000. So what would be your ceiling in this instance here? And the answer is 15,000 feet. It's broken. So if you guys remember, few and scattered do not constitute a ceiling. Broken and overcast will constitute the ceiling. And that's very important when you're trying to figure out if you're a VFR or IFR, what's your ceiling, that sort of thing. So you'll get some permutation or variation of that question. They're going to point it out, you know, what the clouds are that are listed there and ask you which of those constitute a ceiling. So remember, few and scattered do not constitute a ceiling, broken and overcast do. Okay, continuing on with weather. Next thing I'm probably going to talk to you about, you know, some of these things with weather are becoming kind of obsolete. The surface analysis chart, you know, a radar summary chart. Why do you care about a radar summary chart when you can essentially get nearly real-time radar on your phone, on ForeFlight, on one of the other apps, whatever? You can put it in motion going back, you know, 30 to 45 minutes to an hour ago and see what the radar trends look like. So a radar summary chart really is getting to be kind of an obsolete thing. The next thing is winds and temperatures aloft chart. You're definitely going to need to have some experience with winds aloft chart. You'll definitely answer some questions with it, and they can be quite useful actually. Okay, so winds and temps aloft chart are actually quite useful. One of the most useful things you can use it for is where is the freezing level. So if you look at the chart, so to get to the winds and temps aloft chart, again, go to AVIATIONWEATHER.GOV. And if you go to here's the main page here, and we go up to, so winds and temps aloft are forecast, so go to forecast. And there it is right there, winds and temps. So click on that. It takes us to this page, and we'll scroll up just a little bit and make this a little bit bigger. So you can see here, so in the area, say I wanted to have the winds and temps aloft for Cape Girardeau, I just kind of touch that area, and it takes me to the winds and temps aloft chart. Over here on the left-hand side is the identifier for the airport. That's a 3-letter identifier. So for Cape Girardeau would be KCGI is the, I'm sorry, CGI, and it's right here. And this is the 3,000 foot level, 6,000 foot, 9, 12, 18, 24. For the helicopter, most of the time we're just going to be concerned mostly with 3 and 6,000 is about it, all right? But if you look at this and you're trying to determine where the freezing level is, so if you look, it gives you, now the first level here at 3,000 is likely not going to list the temperature, but once you get more than 3,000 feet above the ground, or more than 2,500 feet above the ground, I think it is, so it'd be the 6,000 feet, or it'll start showing the temperature. So for KCGI here, it's quite warm, even at 6,000 feet, 17 above. So if you keep going over to higher and higher altitude, you'll finally figure out exactly where the freezing level is. And here at 18,000 feet, it's 4 degrees below, and at 12,000 feet, it's about 8 degrees above. So, you know, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 16,000 feet would be your freezing level. Obviously, that's not a problem for a helicopter staying below 16,000 feet. But in the fall, when things start to cool down, once you get into September, October, November, you're going to start seeing these freezing levels coming on down to quite a lower altitude. And let's say, for instance, that you were wanting to do a cross-country flight from, let's say we're going to go from Cape Girardeau to, Minot, North Dakota or someplace. You could look at the freezing levels, both at the forecasted freezing levels, both at Cape Girardeau and at Minot, North Dakota, and see what the difference is. In fact, let's just look at that right now. If you looked at Minot, North Dakota currently, again, Minot, North Dakota, here's the MOT, that's Minot, North Dakota. The freezing level, we're at 1 at 12,000 and 10 below. So the freezing level is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of just above 12,000 feet. Well, we're at 16,000 feet at Cape Girardeau and 12,000 feet at Minot, North Dakota. So, if you're in an airplane doing a cross-country flight, you would definitely, and there's any chance of precip, you would want to stay below 12,000 feet, and you could avoid pretty much any risk of icing. All right. So again, in the fall, as the temperatures start to go lower, pretty easy to take a look at your departure airport and see where the freezing level is there, and then go to your destination airport and see what the freezing level is there. And let's say we're going to go from here to Chicago. If we were to look, and our freezing level down here at Cape Girardeau is 2,000 feet on that day, but you look up at Chicago and the freezing level is only, say, 1,000 feet or so, then you would definitely want to keep your head out of your butt and make sure that you don't get into icing if there's some precip going on, if you're going to be flying at, say, 1,500 feet. So that's one of the most useful things for the winds and temps aloft chart, is to figure out exactly where the freezing or level where you could encounter icing if there was precip available to be had. And that's probably one of the most useful. And obviously the direction that the wind's going can be useful for cross-country planning and trying to get your best performance, whether it's going to tend to be lower to the ground or a little bit higher altitude. So, what kind of questions are you going to ask or be asked on the exam? Well, the specific questions you're likely going to be asked is, and they may just pick a particular airport and say, okay, at Indianapolis, Indiana, what is the freezing level at Indianapolis, Indiana, or what would be the most favorable winds if we were doing a cross country between point A and point B. So you'd have to look at some airports along the way and see what the winds aloft forecast is and make your best decision there. Okay, so let me show all you helicopter pilots out there something that's very, very useful for weather, and it's called the HEMS tool, H-E-M-S tool, or Helicopter EMS tool, and it's available right on the Aviation Weather.gov website. And so let me show you where that's at. So if you look on here, again, if you go up here to the top, you'll see this says tools, and we'll scroll down to there's the HEMS tool, H-E-M-S tool. Just click on that. All right. We're at Cape Girardeau, so let me move this around just a bit and I'll show you. I'll put Cape Girardeau kind of in the center of the picture here. All right. So here's Cape Girardeau right here. All right. So I can look around me very quickly. This is going to show me whether my weather is VFR, marginal VFR, IFR, or whatever. So we're right here, and I've got weather all around me right here. Be kind of a bit of an issue to blast off out of here real quick because you got weather all around. But how about we're sitting up here at, let's say we're up here at Perryville. Here's the little thing for Perryville. Well, it's green, and so it shows that where I've got VFR weather. So if I need to quickly pick up a patient here at the hospital at Perryville to go for a flight to St. Louis here in the next, say, 20 or 30 minutes, I can quickly look at this and say, hey, I'm VFR all the way between Perryville here and St. Louis, all right? Or if I'm over here, wherever you're at, you can quickly take a quick gander here at the helicopter EMS tool and get a quick idea whether the weather surrounding you is VFR, marginal VFR, or IFR. So when you need to make a quick decision, you can pull that up and quickly determine that. And it's also a good thing to keep a look at if you're working as a helicopter EMS pilot. Keep abreast of what your weather is. You can quickly look at the HEMS tool, get a nice overview of the area around you. It's a very, very useful tool. Okay, so the next item that we're going to look at is going to be Prog Charts or Prognostic Charts. Okay, so how do we find those? Well, again, if you go to AVIATIONWEATHER.GOV and you look across the top here, and a Prog chart is a forecast. So here's forecast right here, right? So we just hover over that with our arrow on the forecast, and there's Prog chart. So we click on the Prog chart, and we scroll down here, and here's our Prog charts. Here's a low-level Prog chart from the surface to 24,000. That's about all we're going to ever need in a helicopter. And if we click on these, it's going to bring up the Prog charts. All right. The left side panel is the 12-hour forecast, and the right side panel over here is the 24-hour forecast. What you want to do, now you might notice that these are color-coded. These are pretty nice. You can actually make out what's what. If you remember back when you did your written exam or your knowledge exam, the Prog charts were all in black and white, and it was harder to all get out to figure out what the heck you were actually looking at. Well, these are pretty nice. They're actually color-coded, and so we'll upsize them a little bit here. And so here's the 12-hour forecast on this side. And if you look down here, here's the legend that shows you exactly what you're looking at. Anything IFR would be inside of a red circle. Marginal VFR is this blue sculpted here. Moderate or greater turbulence are surrounded by a segmented kind of amber colored circle here. And then your freezing level and freezing level at the surface are identified on the chart by these sort of aqua green color lines as well. So these are pretty easy to make out what you're looking at now. Much better than it was on your knowledge exam. So okay, so what kind of questions are you going to have to field on these? Well, there's literally every permutation of a question you can think of. And basically what they're going to do is ask you, okay, on this Prog chart, they'll just pick a spot. Like, we're here at Cape Dorado. What is the forecasted weather for the next 12 hours here, right here at Cape Dorado? What's the weather forecast predicting? Well, it's inside the blue sculpted area, so that would be marginal VFR. Or let's say they picked Huntsville, Alabama. So here's Alabama. Here's Huntsville, Alabama, up towards the north part of Alabama. What would be the forecast for the next 12 hours for Huntsville, Alabama? Well, it's inside the red IFR section here. And so obviously it's going to be forecast for the next 12 hours to be IFR in northern Alabama, including Huntsville, Alabama. So, okay. So again, what you want to do with this is you want to look at the Prog charts and figure out, make sure that you know what you're looking at, that each of the identified areas on there by color, and so that if you're asked a question on it, you can readily answer the question. And again, there's so many different types of questions that you go with on a Prog chart. You just want to be well aware that you can identify the different regions that are indicated on the Prog chart. Okay, so about the last thing we're going to talk about on weather is the difference between AWOS, ASOS, and ATIS. AWOS and ASOS, AWOS stands for Automated Weather Observation System or whatever, and ASOS is Automated Surface Observation. And they're very, very similar. They essentially give you just basic weather information, the direction of the wind, the speed, ceilings, may tell you some information about lightning in the area, that sort of thing. But it's pretty basic weather information. Just going to get the winds, direction, and visibility and ceilings. However, ATIS is, you get a lot more information on ATIS. All right. So ATIS can be, in addition to giving you the weather, they can tell you about closed runways, or taxiway Alpha 5 is closed from here to wherever, or there's a crane with construction off the end of runway 18. So it can be a lot more information. Not only that, it may ATIS can also give you information about procedures for leaving out of the airport. You listen to ATIS, it may say, okay, all VFR departures contact clearance delivery on certain frequency, and so you just do whatever it tells you to do. Some of the larger airports, that when you listen to ATIS for departure, they're going to give you some specific departure information and sequencing between talking to clearance delivery and ground and tower and that sort of thing. So ATIS is mandatory, right? The biggest difference for AWOS and ASOS are recommended that you listen to them. Always a good idea to listen to them, but not required, right? ATIS is required, all right? And there'll be a phonetic identifier for the ATIS information. So if you turn on to listen to ATIS, it'll say ATIS information Bravo, or information Charlie, or information Delta, whatever. And so when you, after listening to ATIS, if you're inbound, and after you listen to ATIS, when you contact the tower, you should give them the phonetic identifier. And you call up, say, 211 Tango Bravos, 10 to the north, inbound with information Delta. And so they know you've listened to it. And you may not realize this, but all of your conversations with towers are recorded, all right? And they got to have it on that recorded line that you've listened to ATIS, right? So they'll ask you if you just contact the tower and say, you know, Spirit Tower 201 Tango Bravo is 8 to the north, inbound landing. They're going to ask you, do you have the ATIS? And so if you don't have it, fess up. Nope, I don't have the ATIS. They'll say, okay, switch up 134.8, listen to ATIS, come back on frequency when you have it, and contact us again. So if you don't have it, fess up, you know, go over, listen to it, come back on frequency, give them the phonetic identifier, and life is good. So the biggest questions you're going to be asked about concerning AWOS, ASOS, and ATIS is the fact that some permutation of question that says, you know, ATIS is mandatory. You have to listen to ATIS. And AWOS and ASOS are highly recommended that you listen to, but not required. Now, a lot of times you'll hear these guys call in, they'll say to an airport like here at Cape Dorado, it's Delta airspace, and we've got ASOS. You know, they make, a lot of people like to call that the 1 minute weather, because it actually kind of transmits about once a minute or so, or updates about once a minute. So a lot of guys will call in, you know, and they'll say, well, inbound, 6 to the north inbound with the 1 minute weather. And I guess that lets the tower know that they've listened to the AWOS or ASOS. Not a bad idea, I guess, but the big difference is ATIS is mandatory, and ASOS or AWOS are recommended. Okay, so that does it for part 6, and we'll continue this on part 7. And again, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys on part 7.